Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build yourself a suburban house. And you can see it's, well, a suburban house, perfect for any neighborhood. So yeah, not too much else to say about it. You could build a whole neighborhood using this tutorial if you were to edit the colors and shape accordingly. We even use some nice landscaping pieces like the resin, and then even pressure plates, completely done interior. We have bookshelves and things like that, a completed kitchen, and yeah, we have a bunch of cool things going on. So without further ado, let's investigate how we'd go about this. Starting off, now we need to get ourselves a neighborhood, and well, that's easier said than done, but we can start off by just placing one house. And here's the thing, we need a road. You could probably do a little bit of a thinner road by here, but oh well. And then, of course, your sidewalk, pretty simple. And then finally, we can start with the driveway. I'd say that probably 5 blocks wide, maybe 6 blocks wide if it's meant to be 2-car, etc. It depends on how you're building cars. If you're doing like whatever I was doing over here, then perhaps it doesn't need to be as large. But remember, if you're going to have cars in the same city, then make sure that these could actually be used by them. Then make it go up a few blocks, maybe like 9 or so, and fill it completely in. This will be our garage, and we can start off by just making it some light gray concrete. It's not going to open, it's not some crazy piston contraption, it's just a nice decorative garage. So something like this, maybe 4 blocks tall. And now we have a starting point. Once we have a garage, we know where the rest of the house roughly needs to be. If we surround this in some walls, add a little bit of a roof, and we can start continuing on, yeah, this gives a general sense of scale. And remember, you should be able to enter this house and live in it in survival, even if it might not have all the utilities or even any crafting tables. Keep that in mind. Alright, garage in place, added some pale signs to make it more interesting. And quick tip, if you're in creative mode and this is getting annoying, control middle click, and then you can place them without opening the dialog. So hooray. Now, I've made the entire house out of birch planks. And I know that's not a very realistic block, especially for a modern house, but this is more of the siding for the house, if you get what I mean. And then, this is why I made it so large. There's another thing you have to worry about, because these walls are double layered. Let's say we want to have a completely different color on the inside. Oh no, look, now we've lost a ton of space. So if we try that real quick, you're gonna see we're gonna lose a lot of room. Even on these interior sections where we don't need the siding, still we lose a lot of space because we need to do a separate color. Like in here, the garage would probably be darker. What do you know? We've lost a lot more room, especially because we have this triple layer here. Yeah, you lose a lot of room very quickly from having that different interior block, but that's kind of part of building. Essentially, a lot of this house is solid, so we need to be smart about how we use our space. So make sure to include enough space for everything. Maybe even make a floor plan on a map and draw it out in real life. That might help you so that way you don't accidentally end up with no room. Now you can see that we have some exterior walls and some interior walls. You can see also very basic. So yeah, it's just what you expect. But also we have this awkward door situation that we're going to resolve in a little. You can see you can increase the size of your door by surrounding it in like blocks. Like this. You can see I have a big red door, but of course we wanted it to be functional, so what do? You increase the size of the door artificially. Then we also have this little outcropping for the garage. And you can see if we're going to have a little bit of a roof showing here, I can't remember the name of this part, but anyways, if you're going to have that, try a different block. And you can even separate it with something like diorite. Also, if you have the outside, which most houses do, then you probably want to add some stairs like this in order to make sure it's not too plain. If it's too plain, then what do you know, it can get really boring. So let's avoid that. And you can see here, these stairs do a wonderful job. We can also add windows, and you can see they're going to be usually taller than they are wide. You could do a square window though, but they are a bit challenging, so we'll have a dedicated segment to that. You can see for the interior, very basic. I recommend some plank flooring, and then we can add carpet or replace it with wool later for various other pieces, because tile houses are the most common. Now, as we continue designing, right here we have our window. And it's very simple. Notice because the walls are 2 blocks thick, we have to choose what block for the panes because we're going to be using panes. Notice they're on the outer block because we can have a windowsill now. Then you can see right here we have some trapdoors to act as shutters because they look pretty. Alternatively, you can use banners for this or even change the block behind them to something else completely different. And then now let's learn about a little bit more. For the roof, we should give it a little bit of support, and you can see right here we're using some diorite. And whenever we reach those stair blocks, the paneling on the sides, then we have a full block. You can see it makes an interesting effect, especially once we get into the roof. Now, we can use this knowledge to create a porch. Alright, yeah, I know it's a bit of a jump, but here's the idea. Ignore the brick wall for now. The porch has little gaps, and then it has these pillars, and then some fences to connect them. It's a perfectly valid thing, and then we have some black stone for the roof. I know it's pretty generic, but let's be honest, a lot of houses just use black things for their shingles, so we're doing the same. And you can see it's kind of cute. We have a nice porch, and then for this wall, we can solve the issue entirely by turning it into a brick wall. And then we can mix in some terracotta here in order to say, oh, it's just some brick wall. Of course, this isn't the best interpretation of that statement. Like, we could definitely do a little bit better. But let's figure out a way to make sure this door mixes into the rest of the house, even if it's using a different color. That way, it looks interesting, we have a bit of contrast, and it doesn't take away from the build. And you can also see how the shutters are doing here. For added details, you could also use some stairs like this. And you can see they can go down, things like that. And now, you can see we can have a lot of texturing, we can do cool things with it. We could potentially incorporate some lounge chairs, things like that. Right here, an older build of mine. I know it's not the best. We can incorporate these kinds of chairs into it in order to make it look more interesting. So let's keep it in mind. That way we can have a cool looking porch and it really wraps the house together. In the meantime, let's figure out the second floor. Typically it's going to be smaller and we'd cut off some parts. So right here, since the stairs aren't here, it's going to be a 1-story piece only. Or potentially we could have a balcony. It's up to you on that one. Most real houses don't have balconies though. I'm just a lucky one. But yeah, let's increase the size of this, go all the way up, and then let's use some smooth quartz to determine where our roof could be. When you design your house, of course, eventually you're likely going to find some issues with your current design. Like this. You can see how this wall is very flat, and from the front, the house, you can see how it's probably going to turn out. The left side would end up very flat, and that's of course not what we want. We want to make it a bit more interesting. And well, we should try adjusting things. It's fine if one piece of the house comes out 2 blocks and you make little changes throughout your build. I've been making them throughout the video in order to make sure that the build works seamlessly. Like here, you can see it's actually moved over 1 block to make it a little bit wider as a build, because I ran out of room for the porch. Things like that. It's completely fine to adjust your build as needed in the case something doesn't line up, something's too flat, things like that. And well, that's why I don't give block by block measurements. It's completely fine to make mistakes and rectify them throughout your build. And well, now that you know that, keep that in mind in case anything looks a little different. That way, you can always make yourself a better build even if you make mistakes. With a bit more construction done, adding a little segment here on the back, and otherwise just making sure that there's little segments all around to keep it interesting, no texturing on the bricks yet, we can see that this thing is really coming together. The second floor is pretty generic, but you can see it has a different shape from the first. If we have an aerial view, look, completely different. Which means this build ends up looking a lot more interesting. And you can also mess with the slope. You can see here how these stairs merge together. Try things in your build like this in order to make sure that you have a bit more variance. Everyone knows how to do the generic stairs to make a roof, but we could also use slabs, and then we could try a combination of them. We could use these kinds of slopes. Things like that. You want to be experimenting in order to figure out what works best, because of course, if you don't really do much with your knowledge, then you're pretty much just going to make the same things over and over. So yeah, make sure that you try new things even if it's not a very good idea at first. And another thing, even if the block might not seem like the best fit, like the wood here, Sometimes you're using it for its color, not what it is, more of its texture. And you can see here, it works very well for siding, so we're going to keep it. If you're worried about that, then you can use a lightning rod to make sure that it does not burn down. Right here, we now have a suburban house. You can see with the roof, it looks nice and complete. However, it's not even on the exterior. And I'm still working on some of those pillars, some of these extensions, things like that. But we can see that it's pretty nice, but there's something critically missing. Right here, look at how flat it is. We're going to need to add some windows, but aside from that, we could also do a bit more with the roof. So let me introduce you to a concept called dormers. You know those little windows you see on houses sometimes? Let's add some. And of course, they can be a little tricky at first, especially on where you place them. But if you get out a slab like this, and then we can make a little window, we could place another quartz block under it, things like that. Eventually, we'll get ourselves a nice little window. Add a piece of glass, and then we just continue extending it. And then we finally add a piece of black concrete behind it to make it look like there's something more there. And as an added detail, let's add a candle and then a fire charge, so that way it looks even better. Now, let's look from the outside. And look, it has a cute little window, we can have candles in it, it looks nice. And it's not perfect, but still. This adds a lot to the build. Let's incorporate those on the roof as needed. Along with that, we also need to worry about the landscape and of course the brick texturing that I still have not gotten around to. So we're going to have to do that. And a quick thing, I learned this way too late in my building career, but you see all these leaf blocks? We all just gravitate towards the azalea and the flowering azalea, and then we combine those two. Why not combine some different kinds together? Oak and azalea, maybe spruce, birch is surprisingly underused. Of course, pale might not work in this unless you're doing like silver buttonwood, which I have some, they're very nice. But still, yeah, you have to think about what you want. And additionally, don't forget resin exists. We can use resin clumps in order to create little flowers on the bushes without having to use illegal things like placing flowers directly on leaf blocks. Doing a little bit of landscape, especially at night, really good for telling if your lighting is decent. Well, we have something kind of cute. We have the resin, we have all these flowers, firefly bushes, and a little bit of a nice arrangement here with these varying kinds of stone. Don't forget, normal things like ferns and normal bushes exist, rather than constantly using sweetberry. And yeah, we can also incorporate some end rods here as string lights. I have them on my back porch. And up here, we have the dormers. And now, let's discuss a bit of lighting, because that's very important. Right here, you can see how I dug down a little and hid some lanterns. You can do this for those black parts on the sides of your roofs. And now, you can see, nice and lit up. Of course, I'm brightening these videos manually, so we don't have to worry too much about darkness. But yeah, little dormers here, varying the amounts of candles, things like that. Let's incorporate landscape all throughout the build, and then let's build in a fenced-in portion of the back. Along with that, here's our front porch. You can see some basic pale garden chairs. If you want, you can use shelves on the back of this in order to provide a different texture. Of course, at the time of creation, those are not readily available. So yeah, and then on the inside, it's way too dark. I've done very little experimenting here, but up on the second floor, here's a little bit more. You can see for the ceiling, some sea lanterns. And then we have a closet here, very generic, basic. But notice how I'm making different rooms. This is our bathroom, so it has different color walls, even if unfinished. Along with that, we should have different floorings for our bathrooms, because otherwise the wood would rot. This can be your master bedroom, and over here can be a smaller second bedroom. Right here, a balcony. You can do whatever on the balcony. Maybe you want some plants growing, you could even replace the fences with leaves, things like that. And the firefly bushes, they're adding some nice ambience in the form of buzzing. Of course, I can't tell if that's whether my ear condition or actual sounds, but still, perhaps you might enjoy those. But keep it in mind, the particles do come with noises. As I continue doing the build, we have tons and tons of little details to get through, and then we'll finally have the interior. Back here, you can also build a fence like this. That way you can do backyard. For now, I'm going to relegate that to another tutorial so that way I can give it justice, because of course, we could do a pool and such, but what about barbecue, a swing, a tree, things like that? There's a ton of ideas you can fit into a backyard, so of course, make sure that you have a lot of ideas for that. And if you're really just, I need it now, and don't want to think too much about it, then potentially just some gardening things, kind of like what you did up front, would work, and maybe a simplistic pool. For now, let's look on the inside, and I'm getting more and more work done. You can see how this wall, it's actually complete, and then we have some crown molding, a TV in here, incomplete, and a completed kitchen. Notice the usage of pale. This kitchen, of course, has everything. Microwave, cabinets, you could hide barrels under these. And then we have a stove in the form of these rails. And then oven, cupcakes, because why not? The fridge. Then we have a sink, dishwasher, tons of things like that. And then we have those random signs. Now, here's the other thing. We also have new rooms. We could do a basement, of course, optional. And that also needs to be its own thing. There's a lot of things you can do with the basement. Then we have a bathroom. You can do vibrant colors on the walls. And then we have our bedrooms. But, of course, this video is starting to get kind of long. So what's the best way to show you how? Simple. I'll show you my pre-existing bedroom tutorial. So that way you don't have to go watch it yourself. You can see here, we have a nice simple bed. Well, not really simple at all. It's still functional. It doesn't have to be. You could try one of those wooden mansion style beds. You can have little things on the shelves, paintings, jukebox. Notice the carpet in here is actually embedded into the ground using full blocks. We have a bookcase. If I turn off my night vision, it will still be well lit, even though it is midnight. So keep that in mind. And then we also have this bathroom. And you can see a banner as a mirror, paintings, vanity here. We have some toiletries in the form of some sea turtle eggs and then some candles. A sink, toilet, things like that, and also a nice shower. Let's think about everything we'd have in real life, and we can cram it really small. In here, we could still take away another block and we'd be fine. Also, snow layers for fluffy towels, because everyone loves those. And then, we have all this knowledge, let's put it into action. Right here, I've done my finishing touches to the build, like adding some sweet berries up here. Notice we're on Bedrock Edition now for those vibrant visuals and, well, things rendered differently. And then, of course, we have our garage. Bedrock has a little gap in the signs, didn't account for that, oh well. And we also added a few windows. The backyard kind of just needs its own tutorial because there's so much you could do with it. And then we just have a pretty nice house. The landscaping's, well, just landscaping. We have all these pressure plates and buttons. We go inside. Note these pots and leaves, and you can see in here it's a living room. Added this wall here because it was just a bit too open, made it feel unfinished. So yeah, if you're feeling like, hey, this is kind of unfinished looking, then you can close off some things. Having little things in the way really makes it feel like a real house. So we have that, sea lanterns on the ceiling. I actually had to re-record this clip because I completely forgot there's a garage in this house. It takes 15 minutes to move these over. Yeah, not fun. But anyways, yeah, we have this area here. Okay, I was worried that was a stone pickaxe, but anyways, you can see we have a grill, a toolbox, more of those pale trapdoors, a box, maybe a freeze cooler. I don't know what these people do here. And then we have a cake with one slice left. Hold on. All right. Now we have the kitchen. I already showed that off. Of course, we have a back door, so that way we can access a backyard. And then for the stairs, pretty simple. If you're wondering about the lighting, like this seems a bit too bright, I'm actually hiding sea lanterns behind the paintings. And then right here, all my paintings are jumbled incorrectly because apparently Dennis is just not ready on this version, so it malfunctioned. So now we can see the sea lanterns hidden behind here. And then finally we have some of our bedrooms, basic mural, and right here there's meant to be an armor stand that's embedded into the ground, so that way there's a keyboard. So yeah, converting between versions isn't the best. And then we have a basic bathroom. You can see, not terribly complicated. Note the pale wood. And then we can go into the master bedroom. And you can see, very picturesque lighting, all those things. So hooray, I think we have a pretty interesting thing going on here, with, of course, a nice suburban house. So let's Alright, and now you can see it's just a house. It's not actually that hard to build. Yeah, I've been delaying this for years because of one really bad attempt at it. But hey, This looks really nice. Even if it's not the most survival friendly, you could definitely make little modifications to make it nice and survival friendly. And you could even build a whole neighborhood. Edit the colors, do different interiors, things like that. And now you'd have a whole neighborhood just off of this one house tutorial. So with that, it's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this video, remember, please like and subscribe. We're experiencing a bit of rapid growth on the channel, and well, I'd like to keep that going. I've been at this for 4.5 years, so yeah, I was expecting to be a little bit larger by now. Either way, enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw out.